I'm curious about when your interest in technology first started. I mean, that's clearly what you're passionate about and you love doing. And you've been a real pioneer in your industries. So maybe we could begin by talking about that.
Yeah, definitely. So my passion for technology really started when I realized I could really help people solve their everyday problems. Like my first job was actually kind of my own little business that I started as a DJ. In high school, I bought my own turntables and mixer and started buying records because I really had a love for music, like all throughout my life. I was introduced to hip hop music when I was 6 by a cousin of mine, and then I kind of like fell in love with hip hop. And so when I was 15, I decided I wanted to go to socialize with my friends, but I didn't like talking to them at the party or gathering as much as I did kind of being responsible for the music and stuff like that. And so that was like my first business. So from age 15 to 21, basically getting paid on the weekends, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, to DJ parties. And that was obviously a lot of having to figure out the technology behind that, hooking everything up, making sure that the sound quality was good and making sure that people were dancing and having a good time and that technology didn't break. So that was always a lot of troubleshooting because things don't always work very well. So that was kind of like my first real lesson in like, okay, if you want to do this technology thing, you've got to figure out, you've got to realize that things are not always going to work the way that you want them to. And you've got to be able to troubleshoot and work through that.
So I think that a lot of people talk about the logistics of running their business, but I would say for me, a lot of my success has come from, especially getting bigger projects at young ages, has come from being able to just not lose it if something goes wrong.
I think it comes down to preparation. And I think that there's a lot of preparation that needs to happen, say, before you enter the job. So in the case of when I was a DJ, it was like before the party, I would test everything. I would get there early. I would hook up everything and I would play through different scenarios of like, what if somebody grabs my microphone and yells into the microphone? That's going to cause the levels to go too high and it's going to shut everything down. Like, what if they don't have a power strip that's strong enough? So definitely preparation and playing through scenarios on my own before they actually happen. Basically planning for the worst case scenarios that I know of. What really kind of solidified for me that I could make a difference using technology was when I was 19, I started interning with the Detroit Pistons in their public relations department. And at that time, obviously the internet was a big thing. It was 2001. So there were websites and there were people using computers every day and using email, but they were still using fax machines and copy machines and a lot of printed paper. For me to really make a difference there, people would have trouble with their computer. I was in the PR department, so to really be valuable to say like a member of the media, like one of the writers covering the team, I might have to help them troubleshoot something with their computer. And so that actually was a lot of similar type of preparation, but also just kind of putting in a lot of extra hours outside of when people were around me. So there's no way around putting in extra time and extra hours and extra work, like when there's nobody around you. Because I think like when there's nobody around you, there's less pressure. And so that might mean, staying up late at night or getting up early in the morning and just finding time to like go through scenarios with technology where there's nobody else around.
I love that because it's funny, I've always joked I'm like a night owl and an early bird, and then I take a nap every afternoon. But I love staying up late just because I've always been like a party animal. And then and then I like getting up early because I feel like the hours between 6 and 9, I get more done then than I would in like an entire day.
Yes. Yeah,
So I love
I
that
feel
you figure that out.
I feel the same way. I kind of figured that out like back when I was in high school trying to figure out the whole DJing thing. I needed the hour, and back then I was a night owl, so I needed the hours at night to figure out what I was going to do. But then like now I'm almost 39, so now I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. So now it's like my brain starts to shut down around like 9 or 10 p.m. So now I get up really early in the morning, and I think the hours between sometimes even 4 a.m. and like 7 a.m. I'm getting way more done. than I do during the afternoons for sure. So I'm the same way.
You obviously figured out how to manage your time in a way that works for you. We had similar experiences where you had a lot of responsibility early on in your career and you figured out what you liked to do early on, which is a huge gift. So what happened next?
Well, I mean, a lot of different trial and error. I worked for the Pistons from 2001 to 2007, and then realized that I was due for a career change and moved down to Tennessee and took a job as director of public relations and marketing at Columbia State Community College. And that was a nice challenge for me because it was more responsibility, overseeing all their websites, their media buying, and working with their IT department to basically oversee all the technology throughout all 5 campuses. And so that became more responsibility on me to like manage technology and specifically websites and digital marketing campaigns that were higher visibility, kind of more at stake. Dealing with things like servers and the potential of websites going down, the potential of things running out of server space, and really like learning again more and more lessons at still pretty much a young age, like what happens in disaster recovery technology scenario. And just over time, stepping up to the plate, wanting to take on that responsibility, wanting to learn more about what to do in those situations. That was kind of running a mini digital agency at, we call it the client side, right? But really like at a business. Like I was working for a business, for an organization, and I was kind of running a little small 3-person team, working on all their marketing, working on all their web and digital. That experience started to prepare me for what I'm doing today, which is like servicing all of our clients and being responsible for all of their technology.
When did you have the moment where you realized you were really ready to go out on your own?
The moment that I decided I was ready to go out on my own actually didn't come until late in 2016. But I would say, between 2007 and 2016, so like basically a full decade, 10 full years, I was starting businesses in my spare time, starting websites, building WordPress websites, writing a lot of content for those websites and monetizing the content. And so while I was working for Columbia State and managing all of their websites and digital media buying, I was also building my own websites, writing content for my own websites, and then basically driving increasing traffic to those websites, selling sponsorships and advertising space, and even selling premium memberships. And so what I was really trying to do at the time was figure out, can those avenues be a full-time career as like a digital publisher, or are they just enough to make more income on the side, which is great. And I think everybody needs that opportunity. And so I was kind of like one of the first, one of the people in the first wave of like being able to use the internet to have like side hustles. That's like really common now. And I think back during those 10 years, it wasn't as common that people talked about it. I think it was more, I think there were probably some people doing it. I think now everybody talks about side hustle, side hustle. I had like 3 or 4 side hustles while I was with the Pistons and while I was with Columbia State. So I knew I eventually wanted to have, like, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, like one day I'm going to start my own business. But at the time, I was still in my mid to late 20s. My kids were born basically during that time, and we had zero money. So like I was not in a position where I needed the full-time job and the side hustle. So the moment to really go out on my own didn't come until about 10 years after I really wanted to. And at that moment it was like, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know exactly why what I'm going to do is going to be different from what I've been doing in the past. So I had my differentiators established and I was ready to go. So that was like, I guess 3.5, at this point, we're in our 4th year. So about 3.5 years ago.
Did you feel like when you finally were able to go out on your own, even though it was a lot later than you had wanted to, you were fully prepared at that point? I've had lots of colleagues who had the fortune to start their businesses when they wanted to, but I've seen a lot of their companies crash and burn because they weren't emotionally, spiritually, or mentally prepared.
Yeah. I definitely feel like it was, in hindsight, I feel like I did it, like I waited a long time. Like I feel like there were multiple opportunities. Even 1 year before I did it, I had an opportunity to do it. And I was like, nope, I don't want to do it yet. And it was literally just because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be spending any time doing any kind of administrative work on a business. At that time, I was still building websites and still teaching myself things. And I still do that to this day. So I definitely have like different reasons throughout the 10-year period why I didn't do it. And then when I finally did it, it was kind of like the couple who's been dating 7 or 8 years, and everyone's like, when are you going to get engaged or when are you going to get married? I feel like that was kind of like it for me with myself and almost with everyone around me. Everyone was kind of like, oh, fine, he finally did it. The point you just made is interesting because I haven't really stopped to talk to people about it. And your perspective on that is interesting to me because it's almost validating. Like, I guess I did it at the right time, because ever since I did it, I never looked back, and there's never been a moment of I did it too early or even I did it too late. There was no right or wrong answer, but I think I definitely made the right call for myself on the timing.
I was very impressed by your presentation, and I thought, this guy really knows his stuff backwards and forwards, and you exuded confidence, not in an arrogant way. So usually people that who have done what they do for a long time, they do know it backwards and forwards. It's like that. It's just sort of like slipping on a second skin.
Well, thank you for saying that. That really means a lot to me. And I don't consider myself by any means like a polished public speaker, but I do think that if you can pick things that you really do know about, that you're practicing every day. One you saw, I mean, that's something that I practice and I work on every day. So it's super easy for me to talk about it. The thing that I always try to challenge myself to do is get out of the headspace of it's so cool that I can do this thing. And because I think it would be easy for me to get up and say, like, well, I figured out how to do this thing and I'm just going to show you guys how cool it is that I think I can do this thing. I think you have to make it super relevant to who's going to be in the audience. There has to be like a so what? What's the point? And so whenever I do any kind of presentation with clients or in public, I challenge myself to make it so what for the audience so that they can get something out of it. So I appreciate you saying that.
I'm not a tech person, I'm an artist. So I would love to know a little bit about why you're so passionate about voice-based apps and maybe what your company is doing differently than other companies.
Well, I mean, the number one reason that I'm really passionate about voice apps is because I'm really passionate about being productive and not wasting time. I think like if you ask anybody that knows me really well, they would probably say, yeah, he's kind of no nonsense with how productive he tries to be on a daily basis. What fascinates me is currently Amazon and Google have opened everything up, their entire ecosystem on top of Google Assistant and on top of Alexa, for developers to essentially code apps the same way that they can code any other custom software application, native mobile app or a web application. And so because of that, you can use your voice to interact with really any type of database, any type of kind of AI algorithm. You can use it to communicate with other people. It can make you extremely ultra productive versus having to get out your computer or your phone and look something up. And I can give several examples of this. At the core of my fascination with voice is really how businesses can save time and reduce friction and differentiate themselves using voice apps, and not necessarily be flashy with it, but just become more productive and provide more value to their consumers. And that's really how I feel about technology as a whole. So I think you can be someone who's not into technology as much, but you can still benefit from technology that has been created for you, even though you're not necessarily maybe in the technology space. If any kind of business can benefit from this kind of technology, even if it's not like really at the core of what they do. So that's another reason why I really like it.
I found it interesting that you have a background as a writer, which is obviously what I've done, as one of my
Mhm.
art forms throughout my entire career. Because you made a comment it was a conference that you were speaking at. It was a video I listened to on your website where you said you feel like with voice-based apps, people can just pull up someone's website at a meeting and immediately listen to the content rather than having to scroll and read. Do you find, and again, just plain devil's advocate, total respect for what you do, that having voice-based technology will ever take away people's desire to read?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I think I'd have to give that some more thought. I think that in order to do that function of asking Alexa or asking Google to bring up the content on someone's website, I was referring to obviously an Alexa skill or a Google action that would have to be created from the content out of that website. And so we have a product called the Voice Designer at thevoicedesigner.com that's a WordPress plugin. So anyone with a WordPress site can go into the back end of their WordPress site and build those voice-based versions of websites. But in order for the content to be there, someone has to have written it. What fascinates me about voice is that you're essentially writing a conversation that someone's going to be listening to and actually interacting with in real time versus writing a book or writing an article, which I've never written a book, but I've written a lot of articles for magazines and for web. And I know that that's kind of like a one-way communication. It's like I'm not really, as a writer, ever anticipating what the user is going to hear and then say back to me, and then have to have like a tree of different options where they can navigate then to the next thing that I write. And so with the voice-based website concept that you're referring to, as a writer, you're having to challenge yourself to write kind of each potential scenario based on what the user might say to you, almost like a choose your own adventure book, except for the user's going to have to listen to it and then respond. And then you're going to have another response to that right away. I don't know that it's ever going to deter people from wanting to read. Obviously, over the last several years, we've seen the rise in audiobooks. You have Audible, you have podcasts, and you have almost an audio version of every book available either in the App Store, iTunes Store, and basically everywhere. So I think that with voice, I don't know that the voice technology necessarily impacts it as much as what has already happened. I think the voice technology with these interactive apps will allow there to be an opportunity for authors and writers to have these interactive stories where they have to anticipate what their response is going to have to be based on the user's choice right away versus kind of like a one-way, here's what I have to say, you're going to either read it or listen to it. I think that voice, the way that I'm describing it and I'm talking about it, is going to have a greater impact on like opportunity for writers to write in a different medium. I'm not necessarily thinking about like, is this going to have an impact on whether or not people continue to read actual written words in books?
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's similar to audiobooks where it's sort of like maybe people that wouldn't normally read a book would pick one up just because it's in a different format.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, it's definitely interesting to think about.
I wonder if it will change the way that humans interact with each other because of, the fact that you sort of are able to make requests from this app. Everything about it is about being more productive and speeding things up. Do you think it's going to have an impact on the way that people interact with one another, positively or negatively?
I personally don't think so. Again, Amazon and Google have really opened this up to developers. And just in a short period of time, I've really seen that the ability for a developer to do a couple different things. Number one, replace Alexa's voice with audio files. That's going to be something in 2020 and beyond that gets done a lot within these Alexa skills that are being produced, especially by data-driven design, because the ones that we've made with Alexa's voice and the ones that we've made where we've replaced Alexa's voice with the MP3 file of a human voice, the adoption and usage rate levels are far greater when you're interacting, when you hear a human's voice versus when you hear a robot voice, at least so far. It's still really early on. And then there's also language that can be used already that's super easy to use within writing these voice apps that allow you to add different inflections and all sorts of different pauses and ways to change Alexa and Google's robot voice to be more like what you would expect from a human reaction. And so I'm definitely not like a psychologist or like anyone who's qualified to say like, is this going to impact the way that humans interact with one another? But my guess is that it's probably not going to have as much of an impact as maybe some people might think, just because very quickly, I think the robot voice is going to get replaced with human voice by a lot of these developers. I mean, will that prevent people from knowing it's a robot and talking to it a certain way? Probably not, but will it change the way that they interact with each other? I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Well, I remember we had talked about the cadence aspect, which is interesting. I mean, that they're already figuring out that people, want to listen to a human voice rather than the sort of monotone robot voice. The way people interact with voice-based apps is sort of demanding, like, Alexa, I need this, or Alexa, do that, or, and again, it's all about productivity and just getting stuff done. Do you think that that will take away some of the humanity when it comes to interacting with each other in real life? You can't always just demand something of someone in real life and get things done.
Looking at it that way, I do think as people, I do know another thing about interacting with Alexa specifically. When the first time you open up a skill or you try to invoke a skill and basically like a new thing that you've never asked Alexa to do before, it doesn't work as well as the second, third, fourth, fifth time. So like she is actually learning. And so I think the first 2 or 3 times, there's probably a little bit of frustration that might happen with new users, people that haven't used that particular thing that they're trying to use on Alexa yet. I mean, I could see I could see expectations changing. I mean, one thing I've just observed personally is that I mean, we're a fully remote workplace, so we have 8 people on our team full time, and we're all full-time W-2 employees, but we don't have an office. We work across the world. I just think expectations of people in general have changed based on technology. With phones now, more so than ever, people are expected to be doing different things than they were expected to be doing 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I would say that there's definitely something to what you're hypothesizing with voice. I do think it's natural that with this type of technology, it should impact expectations for productivity for sure. I do think that on a case-by-case basis, it could impact the way that humans communicate with each other, kind of the same way that technology has had an impact on that over the last 10 to 20 years. For example, I don't know that expectations around replying to an email or a Slack message or something like that on the weekends or after hours would have ever been there, 15, 20 years ago, just because there wasn't the technology to take home with you. When I was mentioning I was working for the Pistons back in 2001, there were probably 5 people in the entire organization that had a laptop. And then if they had a laptop, if they took it home, they had to hardwire it in to get internet access. So the expectations that anybody was able to reply to an email, even though email was very, very important back then, the expectations that anyone would reply unless they were in the office during office hours was 0. And so that's obviously evolved. And so I think that with voice, evolving that even more to your point about productivity, there should be more expectations, I would say 10 to 20 years from now, around like how productive can you be? How quickly can you get something done? You've got all this technology at your fingertips, so what can you do with it? That will for sure be a bigger impact, I think, than just maybe the way that people are verbally communicating with each other. That's my take on it.
How do you balance work and life? I know you're married, you have 2 young kids, a fair amount of hobbies, and you're into your health. We spend so much time talking about productivity. How do you balance being productive and having this thriving company and doing everything that you do with just being a human?
Definitely prioritizing is the most important thing, and communicating really with my wife, Kate, making sure that she and I are both on the same page related to what we want to try to accomplish in our lives with our kids. And obviously professionally, it has to play a big role in that. So communicating really specific details around what we want to achieve both with the family and professionally is critically important, because then that dictates the design and the implementation of the roadmap that is kind of like our daily lives. So for me, it's personally, it's about exactly what am I doing almost every minute of every day. And then obviously knowing that like that plan is never ever going to be executed. I'm never going to bat 1,000, or, you know, I'm a big sports guy. There's always going to be misses. I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to always hit that to a T. Case in point, kind of got a client waiting for me right now. That happens all the time. And what I have to do is just realize that the imperfection is okay, and the imperfection, you know, makes you who you are, and you have to just do the best that you can. I've started to meditate on a daily basis, just, you know, over the last probably 3 months, 4 months. And so it's about having the plan, trying to execute the plan the best you can, not beating yourself up when you don't execute the plan, and then just surrounding yourself by good people that you can rely on, because you can't do it all. You have to have a good team around you, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's coworkers, employees, whoever it is. So I've really tried to communicate, prioritize, and not beat myself up, and surround myself with really good people. So those are kind of my 4 things.
Okay, that's awesome. And my last question is, what is your favorite thing about what you do?
The instant gratification of solving someone's problem has always been my favorite thing, and I think it always will be. And I think that's what drives business. And it started with, can you show me how to do this thing in a Microsoft Word document back in the late 1990s, right? And it's evolved into like stuff like, my business doesn't know the breakdown of how many people view us on a mobile device versus a desktop device. Can you show me that? Or my business isn't showing up anywhere on Google. Can you help me with that? Or now with voice, how can my business get on Alexa? How can I create a podcast? All these different things are really micro things that can be really solved right away through rolling up your sleeves and doing the research and figuring it out. And that's how I've always been. I've always been like, yes, I want to help you with that. Even if I don't know the answer, I'm going to go learn the answer, come back, show you what I did. You're going to now have what you wanted. And now I'm going to be able to teach you and other people how to do that. And so that's what drives me. That's what drives my content. And that's what drives our business, really. You know, we try to pick things that are easy for us to provide value on. And that's why and like be different. There's not a lot of companies that do there's companies that provide the services we provide, but there's not a lot of companies that actually do the things that we do. That's because of wanting to solve those like really, really having a desire to solve those problems, and getting the instant gratification from solving someone's problem doesn't really suck. You know, it makes you feel good. So I've always liked that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate, you spending time with me and answering my questions.
I appreciate it. Hopefully
All
we'll
right.
talk a lot more in the future. Let me know what I can do to help you out.